Welcome to Real Estate Investing for Women. On this show, you will learn how to create wealth through real estate the blissful way. That means with very little stress and very little time. We talk about strategies, mindset, heart set, money smarts, resources, and so much more to ensure you're able to create the success you most deeply desire. Now, here's your host, Moneeka Sawyer.
Today, I am so excited to welcome to the show, Walli Miller. Walli is a financial coach and a self-proclaimed money nerd. She loves spreadsheets and has been known to watch PBS specials about retirement just for fun. It's exactly this passion for all things money, including spending it, that put her on the path to her true calling, helping high-achieving young professionals become work optional by taking control of their finances without sacrificing their lattes and brunches. Yay! Walli didn't start out as an expert. She is a first-generation college graduate and daughter of immigrants. She didn't always understand money or building wealth. She didn't grow up looking at stock charts with her dad or balancing the checkbook with her mom. They didn't talk about money much in her family. It took a Forbes article to make her reevaluate what she was spending money on and the true cost of her purchases. After that, Walli began listening to podcasts, reading personal finance books, and ingesting every bit of financial information she could find. And now she will be work optional by the age of 40 and is committed to putting as many people as possible on that path to financial freedom through balanced spending, saving, and wealth building without deprivation. Yay, Walli, that is quite a bio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Moneeka. I'm really excited about talking all things money.
Yeah, I love it too. And I love that this conversation is going to be a little bit different. So ladies, Walli actually came to me from someone who books many of my guests on my show. She was also referred to me by two other people. I don't know if you know this, Walli. Yeah, so she was referred to because she's part of the FIRE movement, right? So what is it? Financially independent, retire early. Her idea about retirement is very similar to mine, which it's not retire like go to the beach. What did you say? Retire on the beach with a drink and an umbrella in it. Drink. That's right. That's right. It's more about being work optional. And I love that, right? Because what are you going to do with all that time if you're just fully retired? I'm sure many of us could find the things to do, but it's nice to be able to have the option. Either you work or you don't work. You're on vacation, aren't on vacation. We were talking about Africa and she's like, yeah, I'd like to go hang out there for 3 months, like that sort of thing, being able to make those choices, right? So I love that there's all of that with Walli, and that's why she was referred to me by so many people. But what's also really interesting is, although Walli is a real estate investor, she does not consider that her primary wealth building tool. She tends to invest more in the stock market. And so what I love about that is, first of all, that's very aligned with my strategy. Also, I manage the real estate. My husband manages the stock market. We discuss for both. So both of us are fully aware of what's happening. We help each other with decisions, but each of us is responsible. There's a division of labor as far as who's watching what. But I think that it's very, very important, this sort of what do you say, this diversity of investments, right? The diversification of investments, so that you have different levels of liquidity, different levels of appreciation, different levels of cash flow. There's different asset types give you different kinds of benefits. And so Walli is actually going to talk to us. She'll tell us a little bit about her real estate story. But what I want her to talk about is, how did you reach financial freedom? Or she's getting there. I think she's 2 years away, about how to do that with the stock market. And so ladies, that'll give you a little bit better idea of how you might add that in, if you want to, into your portfolio. Now, if you have very little money, you're just getting started, you need to pick one strategy. I just want to be clear about that. And then you grow that, and then you can diversify. But it's good to have the knowledge base to know, oh yeah, this is something that I aspire to. Or if you've already got enough of a portfolio that you can diversify, this might be the way to do it. We've had a few other people on the show talk about stock, right? So you guys have already heard this before, but it's been a little while. And so I thought it was really appropriate to bring Walli on. So sorry for that huge lead in, Walli, but welcome.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's really important. One of the key things that you said there, that diversifying is really important, right? When we're thinking even about just real estate, having one property and counting on one tenant only can be a really scary thing, right? And we know that the markets fluctuate. Sometimes it's a really hot stock market, right? It's a bullish market. And then sometimes real estate is doing much better, right? So having a diversified portfolio is really important for your financial independence and sort of your success of your nest egg.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you get a lot more volatility with the stock market, which you can really benefit from. And the real estate market is much more stable. I mean, it's a hard asset, right? And so even when it goes down, you can kind of hold on to it and it'll stay. Eventually it will recover, right? Usually, not 100% of the time, right? So it's they're just different kinds of assets and give you a different level of safety and stability, but also different levels of growth, for sure. Growth as well as losses, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I do say that I am a buy and hold real estate investor, and I'm also a buy and hold stock market investor. So if you're thinking about turning $1,000 today into $1 million tomorrow, like that is not the strategy that I use. And I don't know how many people can really do that. But I am a buy and hold investor. And because of that, the volatility sort of evens out, right?
Yeah.
So the risk of losing as much money is lessened. The same way, for example, if you're going to do a flip, right? You need to make sure that you flip that house right away, and you have holding costs that you might need to consider or take into consideration, and then whether or not you're going to have a buyer. So there's all of these different ways of investing, both in the stock market and in real estate. And I like to say the reason why I like the stock market, right, is not necessarily because the growth is so much better or worse, right? It's because it's the lazy way.
Yes, it is. I agree.
It is one of the easiest and simplest ways for me that I have found, even as a real estate investor, right? My husband and I have tried to add properties, being under contract, looking, all of these things. And of course, there's some ways to sort of mitigate that, right? If you have a really great team. But when you're just starting out, I found that I can sort of set it and forget it when it comes to stock market investing. So that's kind of why I prefer it a little bit better.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because my real estate business is a set it and forget it. And there is a lot of front end research and stuff like that that has to happen when I'm buying a new property or whatever. But I find that the same with my husband with the stock market. You know, he's reading newsletters, he's doing research. He does a ton of research on every stock that he buys because we hold them long term. So there is also a lot of front end research that happens. Then he does a set and forget type of thing too. But I think that you can do that on both sides. Although I will say on both sides, there are opportunities to have to work a lot harder, right? Depending on what you're doing, how quickly you want to make your money, how much risk you're willing to take, all of those things. That's going to be true in both kinds, right? There's a lot of different ways to make money on both sides, whether it's stock or in real estate or just any kind of investing, right?
One of the reasons why I like real estate is because of the cash flow, which is very different than investing in the stock market. So it's sort of understanding first what type of investor you want to be. Do you want to have a more active role or a more passive role? My real estate is pretty passive. I have a property manager. I get about 2 phone calls a year, and that's about it. So it's as passive as I could possibly make it for me. But so is my, stock market investing, right? When we're thinking about, I think there's an active investor and then a passive investor. One of the ways to be a more passive investor for the stock market is, instead of thinking about all of the researching in separate companies or individual companies, right? I just don't have the time for that. I don't want to look at 16 different screens, read financial reports, and look at all of the different analysts and analyst reports, right? I don't want to do all that analyzing. I prefer the index market. I prefer investing in index funds. And so just a little bit of a sort of investing in stock market. What is an index fund, right? When most people come to me and they're like, I want to start investing, like, what should I buy? And I'm like, okay, I wish I could tell you these 2, 5, 10 companies are going to be the next best thing and are going to give you the most bang for your buck, right?
Mhm.
But we just don't know, right? When we think about Kodak, for example, back in the day, Kodak was the monster, right? They were the beast in their field. And today you ask a Gen Zer and they're like, what's a Kodak, right?
What's a Kodak? Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's different. So rather than trying to think about what are the companies that are going to be the next best thing, which has this risk, right? Because we just don't know. Past indicators are not they're not indication of what's going to happen in the future. Rather than trying to find individual companies, I like to invest in an index. For example, the S&P 500 index. And what is the S&P 500? We probably heard the NASDAQ is up, the Dow Jones is down. The S&P 500 is simply the top 500 companies in the United States. So I don't have to think about, okay, what company should I invest in? I purchase an index fund, and guess what? I get the best top 500 companies out there, and I get a lot of diversification that way. So I think maybe my investing style might be a little bit more, even more passive. That's why I say it's the lazy way. I don't need to look at researching and reports and things like that. And it's a self-cleansing index, right? If the companies start doing poorly, they get taken out and the next best companies get put in without me having to do anything. So that is one of the ways that I invest and why I consider myself sort of a lazy investor.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, so how did you start and build your portfolio so that you can become job optional or work optional?
Yes. So I made some really bad mistakes when I was in my 20s, right? I got a really good paying job. I was able to stay out of credit card debt. I was paying off my student loans, but I didn't really know what to do with that money that was left over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did put some money into savings, but like, how much are you supposed to save? And I think this is one of the biggest hurdles that people have to getting motivated to save. Because if you do not have a clear goal, a clear purpose, a clear passionate why about what you're saving for and why that's important to you, it's not really motivating to save money. And I didn't have a clear, passionate why of what I was saving for. I wasn't even thinking about retirement, right? I was in my 20s and retirement seemed so far away. And I didn't even know how to do that properly. And so what I did with the money that was left over, I just spent it. I enjoyed life. I went to restaurants. I traveled. I bought a lot of shoes and a lot of clothes. And it wasn't until I realized I had received a Social Security earnings statement. Okay. And I think you get it maybe after a decade of work. And you can actually just go to the Social Security Administration website and it gives you a listing of your earnings, right? Your whole lifetime earnings. And when I looked at that and I added up every dollar that I have ever made from my first job when I was like 14 years old to present day, I couldn't believe the amount of money that I had made and I had nothing to show for it. I didn't have my savings account, my bank account balance did not reflect that. And that was when I realized that I had to do something different. The second thing that happened was that I was in a 9-to-5 career corporate job, and I actually really liked my job until things changed, right? We had a shift in management and there was a lot of bureaucracy, and sort of my ideal workplace became very toxic. And it was at that moment that I realized, oh my goodness, I am going to have to be here for the next 20 years or 30 years. And that just seems so, it seemed so devastating to me because even if I had switched employers, I knew that something like this could happen. And that was when I realized, okay, I need to do something. I am missing the mark here. What is it that I can do? And I went to the land of Google to figure out, how can I retire early? What am I missing? What is this wealth building journey? And it was at that point where I discovered that the component that I was missing was wealth building. I didn't even connect with that word, right? Like, to me, when I thought about wealth, I thought of like an old man in a velvet robe smoking a cigar. I didn't even know what wealth building meant to me, like what wealth meant. I wasn't an actor, I wasn't a singer, I wasn't a athlete. So I was like, how am I really going to build wealth? And I had to redefine what wealth meant to me. And what I wanted was freedom over my time. I wanted to spend time with loved ones. I wanted to travel. And I couldn't do that in a 9 to 5, even with paid vacation, right? There's some limitations there. And so that was when I turned to that component that I was missing, which was wealth building.
Perfect. And then, so how did you start that journey? What were the steps that you took?
Yeah, one of the first things that I said was, I don't have money to invest. Okay, so I understand that compounding growth is the key, but I don't have any money to invest. But that really wasn't true. I had to get really intentional. I had to get real about what I was doing with my money. And as I looked at, okay, this is what my take home pay is. This is my most essential expenses, right? Keeping the lights on, a roof over my head, food on the table. Those were the most essential expenses. And when I looked at the difference between what my take home pay was and what my expenses were, I said, wait a minute, I don't have this leftover money every month. Like, what is going on? And so it was there where I knew that I had kind of a shopping problem. I was a pretty impulsive shopper. And so I began to reel that in. And what I began to think when I went to make purchases was, is this shirt or pair of pants worth it? I could either buy this pair of shoes, shirt, pants, whatever it was, or I can use this to build wealth. And really what I was saying was, I could use this to buy my freedom. Right. And so I began to be more intentional. So I went from sort of impulsive shopping and a mindless spender to being a more intentional spender. And it was at that point where once I widened the gap between what I needed every month, right, what I was spending every month, that leftover, I began to invest. And I like to tell my clients this acronym. When we think about expenses, right, because this is not about deprivation, right? It wasn't that I wanted to cut out all the things that I loved. But when we think about expenses, we need to think about this acronym, which is cutting the fat, and it's FATT. And FAT stands for food, accommodations, transportation, and taxes. Those 4 things. And as a higher income earner, I realized a lot of my paycheck was going to taxes, right? And so I realized that the government, right, the IRS actually rewards those who save for their future. And I began to use those type of accounts like a 401k or 403b or an IRA, right? And even if you're self-employed, I mean, if you're self-employed, you have even more tax benefits, right? So I began to learn a little bit more about that. And then, as I mentioned, I sort of took the passive way, the easiest, the simplest road to start investing, which was that I realized that I didn't have to do all of the analysis on all of the companies, right? I didn't have to sit down and do all of the research. I could just buy something like the S&P 500 index, which would, give me that diversification that I needed and the growth that I needed. I mean, when we think about 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, the S&P 500, so the average growth of the top 500 companies was 20%. In 2021, it was 27%, right? Now, of course, that's not going to happen every year, but to just think about savings accounts right now, which I don't know about you, Moneeka, but my savings account earns me less than 1%. Saving money isn't going to be enough. So really finding ways to find a better growth, a better rate of return is really what made the difference.
Interesting. And so then did you have a strategy like each month? So there are a couple of different things that my husband and I did to get the money kind of flowing into our other investment accounts. We had an automatic withdrawal once every single month. He would get paid on the 1st and the 15th, or I would get paid on the 1st and the 15th. And out of every single paycheck that went in, 10% came out and immediately went to our brokerage account. Like it was a literal automatic transfer, $500 goes, every month to this. It was a budget item. So when I was doing my budget at the time, I don't budget now, yay, because I don't have to, but back then I certainly did. And it was a budget item. Like that was not something we cut. We would cut going out to dinner, we would cut vacation, but we wouldn't cut that. So did you have some strategies on how to grow the funds that went into your investing?
Yeah, I mean, just like as you mentioned, like I had to get really clear about where my money was going.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I had something called budget leaks or wallet leaks, right?
Yes.
I was sort of, I would go to Target to buy toilet paper and laundry detergent. And then next thing you know, I spent $100 in home decor. And it was becoming more aware of what my spending habits were and spending patterns were, that I realized, okay, if I can become a more intentional spender, if I can become more mindful about where my money is going and what I'm spending my money on, I can increase that gap, right? Widen that gap between the amount of money that I spend every month and what's left over. Now, what was left over, I did a couple things. The first thing was that I believe, and I know you've talked about this too, your cash, your emergency fund, your rainy day fund needs to be there, right? That is not investing money. That money is not meant to grow. Like that money is there to provide that safety net, that cash cushion. So that was the first thing that I did. I focused on making sure that I had cash reserves available to me for when the tire was going to blow out in the car, for when I needed to replace something in the house, whatever that case might be. If I had a loss of income from my job, that I was able to cover my most essential expenses. Now, once I was able to cover, I had enough money in cash reserves, then I went into investing. And I believe in automation.
Great. So with the cash reserves, where did you put that? Was that just a savings account or a money market account?
Yeah, the cash reserves were just in a money market account, in a savings account. I have a little bit of a different strategy right now because we're in a really unique situation, right? Back in the day, CDs or certificate of deposits could increase, could really help you grow a little bit, right? You would get a little bit higher interest on that money. I remember when CDs were 5% and 6%, right? Long gone are those days. So today, my husband and I, we have about a year's worth of cash. And I know a lot of people are going to cringe because they're like, oh my God, inflation is eating that away. My husband would go with much less, but I need to sleep at night and I like to have a bigger cash cushion. And so what we decided to do was that we have about 3 months available in cash right now, sitting in a savings account. Then we have the remaining money in something called an I bond. And that can be a little bit technical, but if you have not read up on I bonds, it can be it's something to consider if you are someone who likes to have a lot of cash on hand, and sitting in a savings account earning 1% or less may not be there for you. So I like to consider I bonds not as an investment, right? But more as a CD, because your money does need to be locked away for about 12 months. And right now, I bonds are returning 7%, and in May, they're going to be returning 9%. It's not going to be forever, but at least for the next several months, a little bit of money that I have put in there can grow that 7 and 9%.
Got it. Okay, great. And so you built your cushion, and then after that, you started to invest, to create an investing account and invest. So talk to me about that. How did that go?
So the first thing that I did was I really focused on how high my taxes were. And I began to use tax advantage accounts I began to use my workplace retirement accounts in order to reduce my taxable income. So let's say, for example, you bring home $70,000 a year. In a 401k or 403b or a thrift savings plan, depending on what type of retirement plan you have, In the year 2022, you can contribute up to $20,500. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do the total amount, but that's the amount that the government of the IRS allows for you. Now, so if you're making $70,000 and you contribute $20,000 into a 401k, guess what? You have just instantly reduced your taxable income. Your taxable income isn't that $70,000 salary, it's down to $50,000. And so this is where we have those debates, right? Like, how come you make a lot less, or I make a lot less and I'm paying more taxes than you? Well, this is one of the ways, right? And this is not a tax loophole. This is a tax rule, right? This is a tax benefit. And so that was one of the first places that I started focusing on. I slowly increased. It took me about 2 years, right? Because I couldn't do it all in one shot. It was, going from being sort of an overspender, I needed to reel in that spending. But as I did that slowly, every month, I increased the contributions to my workplace retirement account until I was able to give the maximum contribution. And back then it wasn't 20,000, it was about 16,000. Now it's 20,000. Now, for people who say, okay, well, I already contribute the maximum amount to my retirement account, is there something else? Well, here's another retirement type of account that has really awesome benefits. It's a Roth IRA or traditional IRA. Now, I prefer the Roth IRA, but not everybody can qualify for that, right? Because there are some income limitations. So if you don't qualify for a Roth IRA, or if you are able to put money into a Roth IRA and you put money into that Roth IRA as well, then what do? Then open a taxable brokerage account, right? This is where you can have an account at Vanguard or Fidelity or Charles Schwab, some of the sort of the dinosaurs in the in the world, right? But they're really reputable. And find low cost funds, because I think one of the mistakes that people will do is that they will say, like, well, I invested $1,000, but there were these fees and management fees and expenses. So really be aware of what type of investments you're purchasing, so that you're not paying those transaction fees, right? Or you can keep them to a minimal. Yeah. And so that was what I did. I first worked on my workplace retirement account. Then I worked on my Roth IRA. And then the money that I had left over was when I started investing into a taxable brokerage account. But my philosophy stayed the same, right? I didn't go into more speculative bets. I didn't go into more risky investments. My philosophy was the same. I either invested in a total stock market index or in the S&P 500 index. And that was how, from 2015, when I started, right? From 2015 till now, I was able to build, between my husband and I, we were able to build a 7-figure portfolio. And a lot of people do not like the idea of like retirement accounts because it's not very sexy, right? They're like, wait a minute, I want to do the GameStop or the AMC. It is getting rich slowly. And I'm like, okay, well, if you think from 2015 to 2021, which was when we really hit our 7 figures for the first time, like, it can happen, right? You just have to be really consistent. And I love what you mentioned about keeping it automated, right? Do these automated returns, set it and forget it. Mm-hmm. The only time you should really think about it again is when you get a next raise, right?
That's
and
right.
Think about, I got a 3% raise. Can I raise my investing?
Wow, you said so many good things in there. So the first thing that I want to say is that with your IRAs, your 401k, your IRAs, your Roths, all of those things, you can also invest. Usually they'll say it's a self-directed IRA, which, on this show, it means a completely different thing. But what they're talking about, if it's a brokerage account, means that you can pick your investments. So in those investments, with those custodians, you can then pick whatever fund you want to be in, whatever stocks you want to be in, whatever index you want to be in, any of those things can be picked. So you can definitely so her strategy is consistent through the entire thing, from the very beginning all the way down to where she's got a lot more freedom with what she's investing in. She's still picking the same types of investments. So that's really, really good. And I love your example of going, what did you say, from 2015 to 2021? That's 6 years, right? So if you think about this, let's say, for instance, you're going for the next GameStop or the next AMC or the next Bitcoin or the next, whatever it is that you're going for, and you make a huge return and then you lose it, and you make a huge return and then you lose it, right? Because you're going to be wrong some of the time too. At that, doing that, you're much less likely to reach 7 figures in 6 years than if you were to consistently grow slowly. And this is something people really need to hear in real estate too, is that sometimes we're chasing so hard that we forget that if we stopped chasing and just allowed, that it would just grow. Right. And there's so many people that have a huge amount, they have a huge nest egg and they're like, I want to grow it really fast. And they lose the whole nest egg. But if you just allowed it to grow slowly, well, 6 years is not really slowly, but you can cause a lot of damage in 6 years if you're chasing the high return, high risk type of investments. So we all have a different level of risk aversion. I have my play accounts that are very, very high risk. We have our safe accounts, right? We do our ESPP. I don't know if you did this too. This was also forced investment. Which is if you work at a company, they'll often have an employee stock purchase plan, right? And what's really, really cool about these, most of the time, you can take a look at it in your own company, but you get the stock at 15% of its value. So on the very first day that you buy it, you can sell it with a 15% profit. That's 15% in 15% in 2 days, right? So you can take that money, either sell it or not, because you have to pay taxes on it, short-term gains then. So it's like, I don't even remember, it's your income tax rate. So we tend to hold it for a year because then it becomes capital gains, which is only 20%, which is low for us, right? But anyway, so when you look at the ESPP, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to do the ESPP. It doesn't make sense. We can't afford it. Yeah, but you're making 15% in one day. Right. So, and even if you pay income tax rate, so let's say you're at a 25% income tax rate, you're still only paying 25%. So it's 25% of 15%. You're still way over 11% that you made in that one day on that ESPP, right? So anyways, that was a lot of numbers and they're probably not correct, but it gives you kind of an idea of when you're looking at where to put your money. There's only a certain percentage of your money that can go into the ESPP also, the same as with a 401k. David and I max out everything. Why? Because it's forced savings. This is all automation. We don't think about this. When he just switched jobs and he said, okay, so here are all the things, all of our benefits. What do you want? And we consistently pick the same things. We're going to do the 401k. We're going to max it out. We're going to max out our ESPP. We're going to max out our charitable contribution matching that they do. In our 401k, they do matching. So we are consistent about putting it in the accounts that will match, because some investments they won't match, right? Some of our contributions they won't match. So we look at all of these different things and we say, okay, these are the things. Now we just don't think about it. It doesn't matter. Now I know what my paycheck is. When it comes in at twice a month, I know what my budget is. I'm not debating every single month, should we be saving this? Should we be saving that? And then we've got our liquid assets, right? So that goes into another account that comes out automatically, right? And then I've got my real estate money. So we've got it distributed in a way that we don't ever think about the money except what to do with it, because that's really fun, right? But we're not thinking about what's going where. And think about, David and I have been together 30 years. So this is a plan that has been worked by us for 30 years. It didn't happen all in the very beginning. In the very beginning, we were dead broke when we first got together. We were like, oh my God, it was a recession. Things were a nightmare. We were both right out of college. I couldn't find a job. I mean, it was hard, right? We house hacked our first house, we could only put 5% down, there's all this stuff, right? So it took time for us to get here, but now it's a completely thoughtless process. It's completely automated. And I love what you were talking about, Walli, is talking about there has to be some intention, right? Like, I love that you set the plan, like, we need to have a buffer, right? Having a buffer in our life saves us every single time something goes wrong, right? We had a little puppy that I loved to pieces, loved Pomfrey. I just loved Pomfrey. He was in the hospital at least once a month. That little guy probably in 1 year cost me $20,000. He was so sick, you know? And I didn't want to have to think about, should I pay for this for Pomfrey or should I pay for that for Pomfrey? We just did it because it was there, right? And that was something that was really important to us. So it doesn't have to be that doesn't have to be important to everybody, but that was important to us. And so when you have a buffer, it saves you if you lose your job. Dave got laid off once. I got laid off once, right? Suddenly we have no job and I got no package. He got a package. So things happen in life, right? So you have it in your life and you also have it in your business. In our real estate business, we have real estate money in case we're losing rent. We have vacancies. We have a mold problem, which I had twice this year. Or we need new garages or we need new water heaters or whatever it is. We've got our buffer there so that I never stress about those things. That's built into the business, is that I've got this account, this buffer account. Sorry, that was a lot of talking, but I really, really love how you're talking about, like, how did you start? Because I remember so many years ago when I started exactly that same way.
Yeah, I think it's important too to have the different buckets, because I think one of the mistakes that I make, and I see a lot of my coaching clients do, is that they say, okay, I have a savings account and all of the money for their savings is in one bucket. So I'm like, okay, well, how much of that is for a pet emergency fund? How much of that is for a replacement car or for a car maintenance fund? How much of that is, if you were to lose your job, how much of that can be dedicated to paying the mortgage, right? And so I really stress, and a lot of bank accounts will allow you to do this. You can have multiple savings accounts and label them in that way. So I have a family emergency fund that is dedicated simply for when family emergencies happen, right? If I get a phone call that someone might need some money, I have money set aside. I have a travel fund. Guess what? I'm not going into that travel fund to buy a new pair of boots.
No way.
For my travel fund. I have a real estate fund as well that is specifically for any issues that come out. This year, I had to pay for a brand new HVAC system, okay? But I didn't bat an eye because I knew that I had been putting money aside specifically for those things. I have if I lose my job, right? It's really if everything hits the fan fund, right? And so I think really labeling every single account for those things rather than having all of the money in one pot. And for some people, maybe it's easy, right, to have all that money in one pot, but you need to have it written down somewhere or on an Excel spreadsheet, whatever the case might be, so that you know, okay, how much money is that pot dedicated to the different categories, right? So that is something that I really recommend to people, because if you just mix it all in, it can give us a distorted view about really what our safety net is.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. And I do a similar thing, not quite as distributed that way, but I do a similar thing with our savings accounts or our brokerage accounts that are allocated for different needs. The other thing, I don't know if you ever did this, but this was really, really helpful for me in the initial budgeting and trying to kind of figure out what I can cut out, is we went from cash purchases and check purchases to everything on our credit card. Not because we wanted to carry credit cards, because we never, ever, ever pay interest on credit cards. I just want to say that again. We never, ever, ever pay interest on credit cards. I have not done it since I was 25 years old. And ladies, you know how old I am. So don't admit it often. But anyway, so but with the credit card, it's a great budgeting tool, because they will give you at the end of the month everything. This is how much of your pie you spent on this. This is how much you spent on this. This is how much you spent on this. This is how much is unknown. What the heck was this, right? So they tell you on your credit card, like how much was spent, how much of your monthly pie that went in was spent on what kind of category. So food, restaurants, entertainment, travel, whatever, infinity, so utility services, that sort of thing, right? But then also you can go through and look at it. Like, I went to Target to spend $5 and I spent $100, and you see it where it got spent. There's no question where that money got spent. And so David and I would go through at the end of the month and go through, okay, these are the things that I can take out. Oh, we want to go on a trip this year. Maybe we stop eating at restaurants and we cook in for 1 month. 1 month made enough of a difference, right? So we were able to use it as a budgeting tool. And then I had to write 5 checks. For whatever reason, there were like 5 checks, but I knew. So we would go through our credit card bill, which was where all the expenses were. And then my checking account, I had 5 checks and we'd each pull $200 to put in our wallets if we needed it, if we had spent it the last month. So that's kind of how we could follow every single thing. So it's not like you have to write it down, or you have to remember, you have to think about it. It was all right there in black and white at the end of the month, every single month. Do you do that or something like that?
I do. I will say, I do not think that credit cards are for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have not been able to be responsible in the past, this may not be a strategy for you. But I rarely ever carry cash. I rarely ever use my debit or card or write checks. I put almost anything that I could possibly do on a credit card. One of the other reasons why I do that, and just like you, I don't pay any interest. I actually pay off my credit card every 2 weeks. When I get paid, guess what's happening? I'm logging into my credit card, I'm checking out the transactions, and I'm making sure that what I had allocated in certain categories. So for groceries or eating out or whatever the case might be, it gets taken out for the past 2 weeks. So that is one strategy that I do. The other reason why I like credit cards is because I like to collect reward points and airline miles.
Yes, exactly. Or cash back is another one.
And so my husband and I, we paid for our honeymoon to the Maldives. Guess what? Using airline points and credit card points and airline miles. We take yearly, given the pandemic, but we take yearly vacations, international vacations, and we rack up those points, right? And we're rewarded, right? Because we're not paying, I think the credit cards hate us, right? Because we take advantage of every single point and we're not paying interest. So yeah. I think that you can be really strategic in using credit cards, and it can be really helpful. And I will say that I actually divide my credit card usage. I have one credit card that goes specifically for all my automated bills, like my cell phone, utilities, things like that. And I don't use any discretionary spending on that card. And then the other one goes for all the discretionary spending, right? So it's things that I have in my budget. So for example, haircuts, we have, dining out, convenience dining, date nights, whatever those things might be. And that goes on a totally separate credit card. And so that makes sure that I'm control of my essential expenses. And I also know exactly what's going on with that discretionary.
Well, I do that same thing too. And what I really love about the credit card for all your automatic payments is I just put that on my desk. So if the other one gets stolen or gets hacked, I don't have to change all those automatic payments again to the next credit card or the next credit card, whatever. So that one that all my payments go into, PG&E and T-Mobile and all of the whatever I'm using, right? That monthly stuff, that all goes on this one credit card that nobody ever sees, not even me, because I don't want it to get lost. I don't want it to get stolen. I don't want to have to change all those accounts. So I love that tip. I started that on very early also.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but if you've ever had a card stolen or lost and having to change all of that. So I love that idea.
Yeah. That's one of my big strategies. We have already talked for like 50 minutes, I think, or a half hour. I don't know where the time went.
Moneeka, I know you don't consider yourself a money nerd. I know you're like a real estate maven, but I think you are a hidden money nerd.
I am actually a money nerd, but I don't admit it often.
Very proudly.
Yay. You know what? So I do want to talk in extra. We're going to be talking about, you need to decide what kind of life you want and then just say no to everything else. But before we go there, let's just quickly talk about how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. I am most active on Instagram, but you can visit me on my website, which is financiallythriving.com, and find all my social media handles there.
Perfect. We overtalked again. I've done this twice today. So I'm not going to ask the 3 rapid fire questions, ladies. Please forgive me because I do want to get to extra. But so if you are subscribed to extra, stay tuned. Okay. We're going to be talking about deciding on what kind of life you want, right? What are we shooting for this work optional lifestyle, and how to say no to everything else. We're going to be talking about that in extra. So if you are subscribed, stay tuned. If you're not, go to Real Estate Investing for Women extra.com. For those of you that are leaving Walli and I right now, thank you so much for joining us for this portion of the show. I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, remember, goals without action are just dreams. So get out there, take action, and create the life your heart deeply desires. Talk to you later. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to find out more about how to become a blissful millionaire, go to blissfulinvestor.com. See you next time.